Hello, hello. Testing, testing. All right. All right. Welcome, Pirate Crew, One Piece aficionados, and card game connoisseurs. They're just interested in a different type of podcast. My name is Yeehaw Yadam, and I'm going to be your host for today's podcast. I'm going to be joined by excellent card game player, years and years of experience at the top end of multiple card games. He is the world champion for Dragon Ball Super from last year, not 2022, but 2021. And he's going to be trying to defend that title once again this year for the 2022 championship. He's a 2-year back-to-back national champion. He's currently invited to Worlds for My Hero. This guy is a titan of card games. And if you do not know him, I'd want you guys to go ahead and meet him. So I'm going to go ahead and push it to him. 1 second to set this all up so you guys can go ahead. Hey. So Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself to everyone. Run of the mill. Run of the mill, he says. Um,
Notably, a big background in Dragon Ball Super. Been to a lot of regional, national level events, worlds, and I've done very well. Taken down taken down two nationals and one of worlds, and I'm going back again this year in March. Playing my hero my hero worlds. Sorry, in this upcoming weekend. That's gonna be fun.
yeah, we got a little lucky.
And
Yeah, we had to. That's why we had to go ahead and schedule this on a
yeah,
Sunday after evening because he's literally this week going for My Hero Worlds, which is insane to me.
yeah, yeah. And we're gonna try to do the same in One Piece, right? So that's kind of, I've been having a ton of fun with the game, and I've been putting a lot of time into it to improve and get better. And hopefully I can, pass on that information to you guys. Make sure you check out also my new YouTube channel with my friend Jonathan Rodriguez. It's called Los Fiends. That's LOS Fiends. We're putting up our content now, giving you guys some tips and tricks and some of our ideas. So hopefully we can all improve together. But yeah,
No,
that's a
definitely.
little about
So
me.
I wanted to go ahead and have Andrew here because I think he is, like I said, a very skilled card game player, and I wanted to pick his brain about what he does to get into these big events, right? Like not just to get into it, but like how he goes about finding continuous success because you see it in multiple games, whether it be Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, you name it. The top of the line players will continue to succeed and succeed. Kind of wanted I have this opportunity to talk with one that plays at my locals. So, with that being said, Andrew, let's talk about the big thing that's coming up, the Treasure Cup. Oh, there we go.
Very
The tr-
exciting.
so the Treasure Cup. We all know it's coming all the way in the month of February, which is not too far away. We're about 2 weeks out from the Treasure Cup, all the way from February 4th to February 25th. I know that Long Beach is going to be the first one. And what do you expect from this Long Beach event? It's going to be in like 2 weeks, 2 Saturdays from now, uh, being hosted by Carta Magica, right?
By the way, are you showing something? Because I can't see anything on this
Oh,
thing. Unless
my, give me 1 second. Let me try to go ahead and share that with you. Oh,
I
but
don't
if
want
I
to be
do that,
talking blind,
but if I do that, I'm gonna troll. All right, give me a second. Let's see if I can
I can
figure
open
this
it
out.
up. Get,
Yeah, yeah,
but if I
open.
open up the stream, it might be delayed.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, because you're not gonna be changing it
No, I'm not
frequently.
gonna be changing it frequently. Wanted to keep up the idea of this little presentation here. So
Yeah, just
basically,
send me the link and all.
gotcha. So basically, the Treasure Cup is basically the YCS, the regional championship for My Hero. And I was just wondering, what did you think, or would be the majority of the board there? What do you think? What do you expect to see most of, and what do you expect to succeed at this event? From your experience, obviously.
I think primarily what you're going to see at this event is a lot of very, very good players doing well with whatever they pick. I think that the meta has a lot of options for a lot of different play styles. A lot of it, there's going to be some matchups that are good. There's going to be some matchups that are not great. But ultimately, I think what is going to decide who wins and who loses at the end of the day is going to be the better player. So I think people should just be focusing on like learning the game and how do I say, like mastering their
Like their
play.
deck and their gameplay.
Yeah, their play, their deck, whatever, what have you. Because I think that's where things are gonna actually come down to, right? I do think maybe once you make it to the top cut, if you make it to the top cut, right, then you're gonna start seeing a lot more of the macro, the meta come into play, right? Like these decks that just have natural advantages in certain spots if they draw the right cards and if the person's playing it right, and you're assuming equal skill level at that point or whatever. But I
Mhm.
think mostly what is going to determine who makes it there is just who's playing better. Who's playing better on that given day. And you basically want to pick a deck that you're good with and learn it in and out, its matchups in and out, and just make sure that you're just not making careless mistakes to basically lose you percentage points throughout the course of the game. I see a
Of
lot of
course.
them. I play against a lot of people at locals and online that just make suboptimal decisions, and that's gonna put you in the gutter. Besides any type of like meta deck choice or anything like that. You could, like Jonathan has proven it time and time again. You can win with anything if your opponents are just not playing as well as you. You can literally win with any deck, like
Well, I mean,
literally any deck.
yeah, I
Think
mean,
Atari.
I definitely, I swear to God, I think he comes to locals. He has like a little wheel, and he spins the wheel, and he's like, "I'm gonna play that," and he somehow
Yeah.
he does it right. So, but I do believe this is something that I wasn't aware of in this game in particular, right? Because most games there's a meta. You can't beat these, these S or A tier decks. They're gonna be what's gonna overtake your community, and you should just see them over and over and over. You expect, let's say, green and red. Those are supposed to be the best decks, and then you would be surprised if anything else made it to the top. But in One Piece, every time I see a tournament, God knows what's in the top. But it could be an assortment of either purple or blue. Every deck seems to just be good, which is really funny because when we went ahead and made our tier list a long time ago before the game came out, we were kind of like expecting this hierarchy, but now we've just decided that actually it's just more skill intensive in this game in particular. Obviously, there's variance that goes with it, but at the same time, you're by playing optimally, you really can diminish those factors. So I definitely do like that about One Piece, but maybe that's just for now because we're in. Who knows what happens in the future?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you definitely don't want to pick, Purple King, right?
Whoa, whoa.
Like
Within
you don't want
reason, within reason, right?
to, like, yeah, exactly. Like, you don't want to like go like overboard and be like, yeah, dude, I can win with anything. It's like, you should pick a good deck and so
Of
on and so
course.
forth. But you shouldn't be worrying too much about like, oh, this beats that and that beats this and this beats that or whatever. Just because like at the end of the day, better players are gonna win in this game.
Like
Just
I
like
guess what I'm trying to
no
say
matter
is
what.
like there's no clear best deck because everyone is like
Correct.
every
Yeah.
week they're like what's the best deck? What's the best deck? Like I'm gonna make these 3 card choices different, and my deck is gonna be exponentially. What did this guy do that succeeded in this top 8 in like Ohio that I'm not doing? He's playing 2 different cards. Are those 2 cards better? And like it feels like that's the conversation that we're having over and over again, when in fact you should just be trying to make your deck the way that you would. But this feels like a very troll response because it's like just be yourself. It's kind of like what it
Yeah,
comes
yeah.
down
It's
to.
a
How do
little
I
bit
get this
of be
girl to like
yourself.
me, Duval? Be yourself, Duval. Come on, man.
I mean, the only other thing I can give you is like I think the best players will gravitate towards the better meta decks, obviously, because they want to give themselves the best opportunity to win. And I do think those are of the green and red variety currently. And I don't think that the gap between blue and purple and those decks is so insurmountable that a good player on either of those colors playing really well and probably having a little bit more luck on their side on that day than a green or red player might need, can still take down the event, if that makes
One
any sense.
hundred,
I do
one
think there
hundred
are
percent.
very viable decks in each color.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, we can outline those. I mean, I think personally, I think the top ones you're going to see are going to be Zoro, Red Green Law, um, Green Kid, Kaido, and Doflamingo. I
Yeah.
think those are the ones that most people are gonna play. I do think there's worlds where like there's other decks that can sneak in there. They're not too bad, like Blue Purple Crocodile, Mono Blue Crocodile. Like those are also very strong in their own right. But I think the ones that I just named are the ones that are going to perform the best.
Oh, I
I think.
completely agree with you. I was just giving you crap, but
Oh.
But definitely, as long as you're comfortable with the deck, you're aware of your matchups, where your deck succeeds, and your lines to lethal or to victory, then you can obviously do better than an opponent that's just not like, let's say they picked up red last minute. They're like, this was supposed to be the best deck. I didn't really get some
Exactly.
practice with it, but I'm just going to run
Exactly.
it. Yeah, I wouldn't expect a crazy amount of success in that specific position. But with that being said, I guess the next question would be, I mean, it's a more wider question, but what do you expect and to be in the top cut? You know what I mean? Like if we had to, speculate, what do you think the top cut of these events would be percentage wise? Where would you think this dice would land?
Um,
And that's a
in
toughie. That's
terms of
honestly a
leader or
toughie.
color, I guess leader or
I
color.
I think color is a little bit more broad, a little bit easier to do it.
Leader than or you say I guess color. I do still like I said red and green and red green I guess so
I guess like
red
as is,
green red
as it
green
is a combination of them. Yeah, of course.
yeah but I think the way that the meta lines up is just decks. Personally, I think if you're gonna break down the meta from like a perspective of, I think a good way of looking at metas is breaking it down not so much into archetypes, but into like specific cards. At least right now, the card pool isn't so big, so most of the decks that are trying to do the same thing, just some do it better than others,
Of
if that
course.
says. So like there isn't like a whole variety of like different archetypes in the game. So a good example of this is like Kid versus Odin, right? They kind of try to do the same thing, just one does it better. Um, like some has some unique cards, unique to it, right? But it's not like what they're doing is so otherworldly different that it's even like,
Yeah, at
like it's too much of a blending, right? It's like, yeah, this color is purple and this one's fuchsia, like, or something like that,
Yeah, they're
like it's
they're
like a
very close.
magenta.
At the end of the day, there
Yeah,
is a limited card pool, and regardless of which, we have to abide by those restrictions, right?
yeah,
So green has to abide by the restrictions that are given to it, which are the very strong, powerful cards it has. So does red, blue, and so forth. And each deck has its
exactly.
weaknesses and its strength versus each specific color. But I do agree with you that I think red and green might hold up the majority of these treasure cups. I'm excited to see how they go. Unfortunately, I'll be coming back from my cruise the day of that event. So I'm going to be watching that stream. Maybe I'll stream it on the side and do some commentary on it just to see how this event goes because I'm just excited to see what ends up being in the top tables. I want to see what people in the West are doing because honestly, this is something I wanted to talk to you about. Our meta started so different than the meta in the East. But it feels like we've gone full circle, and this happens in a lot of card games too. We try to be different than the East, and then all of a sudden we end up in the same spot as the East, where a lot of green and a lot of purple came out to be the victors to topple the greens, right? There was a lot of red, then green came, and then purple came, which is very funny as like how it progressed that way in the East. And I feel like we're kind of seeing something similar to that, at least in locals.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think that it's like at a meta perspective, it's kind of crazy to think that we're gonna redefine a meta. I think what we're gonna like redefine is maybe the optimal way of playing X deck, right?
Hmm.
But it's not like the cards that it's not like the deck's completely like like we're playing we only have one set to choose from. It's
True,
not like we're
true. And there's
playing
only so
like
much we can do.
yeah, it's not like we're playing like with this like whole additional like like if you
Bro,
had additional promos or starters or
Bro,
stuff
the
like
East
that,
was
like
playing
additional cards.
checkers
Yeah,
and we're
exactly.
playing chess, all right? It just is what it is.
But we'll probably be like, okay, how do I make this Zoro deck better? How do I make this Law deck better? And like, what are my options here? And like, what can I change? And how can I play it? How can I look at Kaido a different way and see how that works and so on and so forth. And I think that's what we're gonna be making. We're gonna be uh, if we're taking a look and we're comparing ourselves to Japan, I think we're going to be more in the tweaking perspective, right? Also, we're a larger country, just based off of like we're just going to have more players.
In terms of
So
player base, obviously.
exactly. So
Yeah,
things
yeah.
will slip through the cracks, right? Because they're going to have the set for X amount of months with X amount of people looking at it,
Hmm.
and we're going to have more people looking at it for
And,
X
and
amount of
well,
months.
the treasure cups
So
aren't
we're
even
gonna,
just North
we're,
America. We have all like
yeah,
these other Western countries that are playing. So I'm just excited to see how it does in other countries. But on that same I note or transition, let's talk about tier list.
oh yeah,
So yeah,
every
I
time.
know. I know. I feel like I'm beating this dead horse. But originally we did this tier list with the idea of like, well, like some decks are unplayable and things. that. And I feel like we kind of fell a little short in trying to make it SABC. But I think it'd be kind of interesting to go ahead and like delete some of these rows and define it a little bit differently. And like meme tier, uh, can win tier, will win, and then like I don't know, like I don't know how to do it. Like maybe optimal,
Well,
optimal.
are you taking a look at it like is a tier list like a meta predictor? Is it like
Sort of like
what
a
can work at your locals?
well, I'm looking at it
Like
specifically from the standpoint of the treasure cups, right? So I'm gonna try to break it down into these three little sections: and theme, can win, and optimal. I think that's a very fair way to look at it because at the end of the day, like you said, it is how you play your deck and how you play as a player, understanding the limitations that's gonna really succeed for you. But I think it'd be
yeah,
also cool to just revisit our original idea of our tier list, which was like the original video I guess we made together. Talk about how we would change that as we actually have played the game a little bit more. So where do you think this lies?
what do you mean?
Let's
Where do you think
start.
this
So
lies?
starting off, let's start off with Zoro, right? So where would
Start off
you
with Zoro.
classify Zoro? I think it's gonna be an easy optimal
Yeah,
from me, right?
optimal.
And in terms of the red
What does
leaders,
optimal mean again?
so
Like,
I guess optimal would be like you wouldn't be surprised if this ends up in top 32, right? Can win is like
oh,
it could
okay,
be it played, but like if it doesn't make it to top 32, that's okay. And then meme is like, you know, you'd be
gotcha,
really
gotcha.
surprised if this makes it into day two.
Okay, fair enough.
I would say out of the red leaders, right? Because we have, I'm gonna count Law and Red Green Luffy as red leaders as well, because they do share those colors. So out of these four leaders, I do think that Zoro is on the more optimal side. The fact that he can just continue to check for like those really nice magic number thresholds is really, really cute. And it makes him just a little bit better at going wide and just like allowing your opponent to pressure. So I wouldn't be surprised if I see a ton of Zoro. Red is a very, very good color in this game. So definitely optimal.
Yeah, Zoro's definitely gonna be there.
All right, I'll
Agreed.
I'll leave these next two to you. These red greens. What do you think about Law and Red Green Luffy?
Well, red green law is definitely an optimal.
Oh, for sure. Then I'm
That's
I'm like in this section with the red. I definitely have played a bunch of players where I'm not like
no,
I'm
that
I'm
is
I'm very
definitely
impressed.
meme tier.
You think this is
That
meme
is
tier?
definitely meme tier.
No,
Yes.
dude. I feel like there is like this. These decks are so close in idea. They just do it a little bit differently. The way I've seen it is like Law is like draw a card, and Luffy is like take a
That
damage.
deck cannot win.
No shot, dude.
It cannot.
It can.
I
Well,
don't think it's strong enough. I don't think it's strong enough.
I guess if we're comparing it to these other decks, maybe not. But I do think that
That's
it.
crazy
it
talk.
I,
I mean,
if
it's fine. Like it might actually make top cut if that's what you're saying.
that's what I'm
But like
saying. I
can
think this.
win is
No,
like
I think this can make top cut. Is what I'm saying. I think I wouldn't be surprised if I see
okay,
a red
sure.
green Luffy in day two. And on that
Yeah,
same
yeah,
accord, I guess
sure.
because they just share these very powerful colors. I think I'm
Yeah, yeah, okay, fair enough. Like
fair
if you
enough,
say
right?
like yeah, it makes top 32 or top whatever cut you're saying, like
Yeah.
yeah, sure. One can sneak in there. It's not that bad.
Yeah,
But
yeah, but I don't think it's gonna be like the majority of Top Cut by any means. Like
oh,
it'll
definitely
just
not.
it's just gonna show up and be like hello. So what about Odin? I know you mentioned Odin and Kid, but obviously I know where you're gonna land with Kid. So I'm just gonna slam him into the optimal tier. What do you feel about Odin? I have been enjoying him quite a lot, man.
Yeah, I mean based off of this categorization, sure, he's can win. He's if someone wants to play Odin and they play it well enough, they can make top cut, sure. They
I do
won't
think
win, but they
I
can
don't
make
know.
top cut.
Yeah, I don't. That's the thing. I don't think this deck can win the whole thing, but I definitely think like it can make day two. If it wins the whole thing, I'd be mind blown. Holy crap, we're going to the moon with it. And then how about the blue colors, right? So out of the blue colors, I do think Flamingo a little bit more optimal than Croc, or what?
Um
How do you feel about him?
yeah, I wouldn't put these quite in the same as the first three, because I don't think that they are in the current format good enough to be able to win the event.
So
I
you would
think
put them
there's a
maybe
distinction.
like here, right? They would
Yes.
top. They would definitely get to top
Just
32, but then
just because
getting
blue
first
is not in the
place.
greatest spot.
Yeah. Getting to that I get what you're trying to say. Getting to first place is definitely a different feat than potentially making day two. And I think that's where blue is as well. I do think blue is a really, really solid color. And it's been surprising me more and more. But again, that struggle with the A drop, like so much needs to go right in that matchup.
If you play against red and purple all day, you definitely have a shot,
You're gonna
right?
kill it. You're
So
gonna be just
I guess that you can put it in that category. You could raise it a category just because if you play Flamingo or even Croc really, and you just play against
both of them
red
are insanely
and
good versus
purple,
those matchups. Yes, it's just
yeah,
green. Green is kind of like a it's like gatekeeping blue, which is okay. Blue gate kept green in the limited battle, so I understand they had to reverse it, right?
yeah, no, like it's full circle,
It's actually full circle. Like blue
yeah,
was
it's
like
like
you cannot play green in limited battles, and now green's like you cannot play blue, and it's like oh shit, man. So how do you feel about these Burple decks, dude? These Blurple decks are I've been vibing with them. They're really, really cool. How do you feel about Kaido as well as Crocodile?
I mean, if we threw everything else and can win, you might as well throw those two in
No,
there.
no, no. I don't think. I think one of these needs to go into meme tier, respectfully, though.
Well, no, I don't. I
No,
mean,
I've
they're
been playing.
about
I've been playing a
they're
lot of this
about as good as
Blurple
those other
Kaido.
ones.
Well, you're
They're
not
honestly
wrong.
about as
You're
good as
not
the other
wrong.
ones.
I just think
Like,
that
I
this
don't think
Kaido one,
Kaido's that much worse than the other Kaido either. Like, I don't think
really.
it's actually that much worse. I think it's like I would never play that one over the purple Kaido. Like, but if he didn't exist, maybe. I don't think
No,
it's that much worse.
no. I've been actually playing a lot of games with him just for like to fun and find out like what's going on with him. I think he's super cool. It just feels like the green matchup, and if people really play the correctly versus you, this deck is pilot's very, very difficult. Very difficult. As well as whereas Crocodile, they get to just do whatever the heck they want to do because the more time you give Crocodile and the less your opponent's aware, the more they can sneak. But I'm gonna go ahead and agree with you. Fine, Kaido isn't in the meme tier, but I know this guy is. This guy certainly is.
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's the one for sure. There's actually you're there's no point in
And
putting
I
that
I
guy.
definitely think this would be like a good final place to put it. Because like you said, if blue is playing versus purple and red all day and purple is playing versus green all day, it really just depends. It's very matchup dependent and
Okay, so if we take a look at our other tier list,
right.
basically all we did was take like B, C, and D tier and put them all in one line, right?
Yeah, necessarily.
Basically.
Yeah, it's
More or
true,
less.
right? It's basically where it came down to. But I think
Yeah.
Zoro really surprised both of us because we both put Zoro initially in like A tier, but Zoro has the more that we play red, when that deck starts running clean, that deck runs has a lot of
Did
really.
we put it in A tier?
We put it in
We
A. We
put
did
it
not put it
below.
in an S. We put no
Oh,
red in
okay.
S.
We put no mono red deck in
No
S.
mono red went into S in the originally. But
Yeah.
when we also put this
Okay,
guy
fair
like
enough.
down here. So things have changed slightly, but I definitely do expect these decks to be the majority of the playing field. And I would reckon if I was playing in these events, that I'd be practicing myself against these. If I was purple, I'd try to probably, find my weakest matchup, which I do think is probably blue or red. Really study up on that, as well as, wherever your deck is, study up on your weakest matchup and definitely try to do your best and hope that you don't hit that matchup.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess it's the best advice I can give. Just game on, man. With that being said, I wanted to talk about this website, right? So this is one of the websites. There's a bunch of One Piece websites, but I just chose this one. It's arbitrary. It's the One Piece top decks website, and I used this website to go ahead and look at the what decks are topping. So this is a list of 100 decks that have topped in the Western region, right? Which is a ton. It's a lot of variety. But I went ahead and this is really difficult to look at, so I went ahead and compiled it. Oopsie, into a pie chart. And I think the pie chart, which is not much better to look at, kind of helps show the representation of where we are in the West and what I think we should expect for this treasure cup, right? So looking at it, it seems like Eustace has taken the biggest chunk out of every other deck, right? Green has taken the majority of any of the tops, then followed by Flamingo as well as Kaido, which I'm really impressed. And Zoro, the red decks really haven't done nearly as well as those other monocolored decks, which is interesting to me. I do think red is one of the more popular ones. What do you think about that?
what is this? We're looking at like what
This is
top
just a
tier.
this is just like a series of tops that happened in the Western region, and just wondering,
Gotcha.
yeah, just this is kind of like what we've been like. I just compiled into a random pie chart that would show like what's been topping in different like events or whatever we're posting on the website. I think there's like 120 posts, and out of the 120, I'd used 100 to make it a nice round number.
Gotcha. Okay.
But
Um,
yeah, why do
yeah,
you?
I think this is pretty accurate, except for law not being a higher percentage.
I think Law has been sneaking in later. I think people were as the game is still pretty new, right? It came out in December. We can't expect everyone to be a professional at this game just yet. But the game started off uh as a very aggro heavy format. No one wanted to play these monocolored decks because being four lifers was so scary. And then as people got better and better, then they started experimenting with Croc, Law, and things like that. And they just started really seeing the potential of these decks. And I think Law has really just taken off recently. It's been insane.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be the case for sure. So I definitely think representative. I think we're going to see a lot more Law at the Treasure Cup, and I think the rest of it is kind of fine. Probably a lot less blue. Just because depending on the stakes, people might not be willing to choose that deck for a high level event. I don't think it's a reasonable pick to play a blue deck if you're going to like if your objective is to win the whole thing. If your objective is just to like do well, make top cut, be all right, like yeah.
Well, this goes a little bit in reverse of what we talked about earlier. Play with what you're most comfortable with, right? But not only should I think blue, and you're right,
No, no,
right? Maybe blue can't take it to first place if you run a little unlucky into like a couple green matchups, which again we expect you to run into green. We expect it, right? So
yeah. I'm not gonna like BS you and say like one deck is you know because of your insane skill you can pilot it to victory. But I think that it is more important for people to get better at the game than it is for them to worry about what deck they should pick.
yeah, I think you have to get like a good understanding, right?
Because
Like,
that will gatekeep you way harder.
oh, of course, like if you're making mistakes and it's not your deck, it's you, right? Like you need to first
Exactly.
find out why you're doing those mistakes and so on to be able
But
to
once
win
you
these
get
games.
there, like once you're like at like a very good spot with that, then yeah, you can start making like the meta decisions. Like okay, now that I understand how these matchups are even supposed to go, because a lot of people just like have well, either they just repeat what other people have told them, which is fine, but they haven't like necessarily understood why does Zoro beat Kaido most of the time, or why does Kaido supposed to beat Kid, or is it supposed to be Kid? Why does Green beat Blue? Like I've seen a lot of people say like crazy stuff like Blue beats Green, and then it's just like in what world?
I
So
have if you've seen that, brother, I have seen it as well. And some of my in the comment section, it's like, yeah, blue beats green. You do this, this, and this, and it's yes, I understand that there is a line where it's beatable, but if you don't see that specific line, it becomes much much harder, right? I think that's something that
yeah,
people need to like stop like fairy tailing because purple is an insane deck. Let me start off by giving an example. Purple is an insane deck. The power level in that deck is super duper high, and there is a fairy tale curve in that deck that I don't think many decks can beat. Do you believe you think that more than do you believe what I'm
uh,
or do you get what I'm
yeah,
trying to say? Like if purple goes first and they have an assortment of stage, top end, and like just ways to like continue the ramp, like it's very difficult for a lot of decks to like to beat that power level of stage, Brachio Bomber, 10 drop, 7 drop, and then you're just like, oh my gosh. You know what I mean?
yeah. Like I do think there's some draws in purple that are very, very, very potent, and they should lead to a victory most of the time. Whether or not they will does depend on a lot of other things.
Of course.
But yes, I do think purple is probably the highest ceiling deck for sure. Just I think the lowest, like the highest ceiling is like you can get the highest. I think the lowest floor deck is Kid, right? So then you have to take a look at like those are the two basically extremes, like hyper consistent, good across the board, doesn't really have any like atrocious matchups, although it could be like slightly unfavored in some. And then like the top of it where it's like Kaido, it's like if you hit the nuts, you're just not losing, right?
Yeah, no,
So
definitely. That deck feels insane. But like and with that same sentence, I have seen them draw the nuts and then find a way to like fumble the bag, if that makes any sense. Because again, player
exactly.
yeah, player's skill is super important. Um so with that, Mr. Paul, I would like to ask you a little question. Ooh, that's the wrong thing here. So based on your understanding of card games, I'd like to go down the idea of like how we would go about building a deck. How do you first start off by building it? What do you look for? How does the curve look? And kind of like what is it that you try to do in terms of your mindset when you first look at a deck?
You could do it two ways. You can either take a look at a card that you want to play, make that like a way to like, how do I make this card? I think this is the best card, or I think this is a good card. How do I build my deck to make sure that this card functions properly? How do I make this card the best, right? So a good way of taking a look at that is like, um, for
I
example,
think
purple is built backwards. Purple is built from card to leader. Leader doesn't do anything really for the purple deck, right? It's just a name. It's an enabler, right? Like yeah, he
gotcha.
burns. Whereas if you're taking a look at a deck like Law, you start from leader to deck, right? Law requires X, Y, and Z. I must play certain cards to make this work. So therefore, that is my deck building restriction, right? Zoro wants to go wide. I'll try to build my deck to figure out a way to make it go wide, etc. Flamingo requires the Warlords, so we need to put Warlords in our deck, right? Whereas Kaido is like, I want to play the 10 drop because I think the 10 drop is really good. So I will build a deck around the 10 drop.
Interesting. So basically, what you would say is like, so, and that makes a lot of sense, right? When you're talking about Zoro, when you're talking about Law, the leader is what's dictating your card building. Zoro, just because of his effect, you innately want to be a low to the ground deck so you can optimize that effect. Same with Law, so you can get to your thresholds quicker. Whereas with Kaido, he just has the Animal Kingdom Pirates. You just want to play the assortment of good top end that he allows you to play because of his name, and his hero power or his ability is just secondary. So you kind of start from the cards to leader. It's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. So going off that idea, right? Kaido and I think Green are the biggest proponents of card to leader, whereas Zoro and Law are leader to card. So
Gotcha.
starting off with Green, what is the card that you would think would be the number one card in the deck? And before you even answer, I'm already going to be
Drop.
looking it up. So the A drop, right? So we're going to try to build our deck to facilitate this card as much as
You
possible. And
could
then
make an argument for the 7 drop because of how good it is in specific matchups like the mirror and stuff. But I think across the meta, you're looking at the 8 drop as your primary build around.
as your
Could go
primary,
either way.
yeah, it can go either way. Both of these cards
Could
are
go either
supremely
way. I
powerful, and
personally believe it's the 8 drop, but some people believe it's the 7 drop because if you're under the impression that Kid is the best deck in the meta, and you are going to face Kid more often against good players who will pick the same thing. You're going to
mhm.
play that more often than you would want to play a deck that's better into the mirror, and the 8 drop isn't that good in the mirror.
But
The
where
7
the
drop is
seven drop is, right? So that's where we
exactly.
would go, right? So based
Yeah.
off of this, right? You already have Eustace, you have the captain, and then now we have the decision of Odin, or we have the decision of Law, Red Green Luffy, or Kid himself. And then based off that idea, I think the deck that facilitates what these two cards want to do is going to be Eustace Captain Kid, which is the regular green leader, right? So we're again building from card back to leader. Right. And
Exactly.
then
Yeah.
obviously the cards that go well with this is immediately the card that searches them, which is Bonnie, one of the whoop, that ain't it. Told her name. And I can spell her name to save my life. Aha. Jewelry Bonnie. So Bonnie it facilitates this sort of game plan because it lets you search these cards. So we're already into a bit of like a lock, right? We're already into like some assortment of cards, almost even 12 if you wanted to max out on each. And then based on what you were saying is you would then have to assess where the meta is or what you believe the meta to be. And then you would
Yeah.
make it, in that fashion, right?
Yeah, and then at that point you just start filling in the gaps of like, how do I make this strategy as consistent as possible, as effective as possible, play games with it, win or lose, see why you lost, make adjustments, etc., and keep going on from there. Based on the card pool, we don't have the greatest card pool. Obviously, we have one set, so it's not like you have infinite options. But you're probably just looking at tweaking ratios. How many sevens? How many eights? How many
Definitely. Yeah,
fives?
like how many would I want to see? How many do I think is enough to beat certain matchups where it is to beat other matchups? And I completely agree with that whole concept. It's something that I hadn't thought of, but I also kind of wanted to get under the idea of how do you think about 2Ks? Since you come from a Dragon Ball Super background, the whole comboing mechanic or countering mechanic is something that's not really used in many card games. And it's something that's a little bit harder to grasp. It was a little bit harder to grasp for myself. And I would like to just have you just maybe share some ideas on what do you believe counter mechanic should be, or like what should we be thinking of when we thinking of comboing or combo power,
In this game, it's a little bit different.
right?
So in Dragon Ball, cards have inherent power, and then you can give them additional power by using cards in your hand. So you can offensively counter, and then they can defensively counter. which makes the counter step more tit for tat. In other words, in that game, it's like if there were you would play all the 2K counters, right? If you were playing DBS,
Right. If you
like
were an
because
aggro deck, you would be swinging. They would go 2K, and you're like 2K. You're the 2K, and then is what
yeah,
you're
yeah,
trying to get
exactly.
at,
Because
right?
you need to match. In other words, there's this thing called super combos there, right? Every deck is limited to four. Every deck will run four because they are that important, right? If you're not running them, you're going to lose because
To
there's
the other
three.
super combo.
Exactly.
Understood.
So basically, if you could offensively counter, I would say you play every single 2K counter you possibly can, right? Without like diluting your deck so much that you it's not a deck anymore, right? So, but because then you could offensively pump, you get me?
Yeah, you can
When
swing
you're
with like vanillas
yeah.
and swing big numbers with vanillas. Who cares, right?
But
I'm
since
still
that's
dealing the
not the
damage.
case,
Uh huh.
in this game, you actually have to consider how much am I needing to defend my cards or my leaders in the first 3 to 4 turns of the game, right? I think
Really?
that's when 2K counters actually matter the most. And then once you reach turn 5 and onward, the 2K counters will no longer save you because there is too much Dawn available. Um, and then what you actually need is more 4K counters. You
More of
need
the
higher.
spells, right? You would need the
Correct.
events to really supplement
To
from
really
there
do
on
that.
forward, right? Because
Or
I can,
blockers, right?
yeah, or some sort of blockers, right? Because the blockers
Exactly.
early on is there's just no interaction format or very
So
limited.
So that's why you see a lot of red decks playing a lot of 2K counters. Well, the reason for that is because they want to utilize as much of their Dawn as possible. They don't really have the flexibility as much to leave up Dawn on the early turns for like a 4K counter, which would be great for them, or the guard point 3K counter. It's a little suboptimal for them. They'd rather just have those cards in hand, force you to commit your Dawn into attacking their battle card for more, right? So instead of attacking for, let's say you're attacking a Nico Robin, right? Instead of just attacking for 5 with your leader, now you have to attack for
Yeah, you're
6.
forced for
So
the six, right? And if you can't
exactly,
afford to pay the six, right? Let's say you wanted to do the six and play a card, then you're kind of in like a sticky situation. That's what red wants to
exactly. So they want to tax you.
do.
That doesn't mean that they're going to counter out of the attack, but they want to tax your Dawn so that you're not able to develop as much or do as much during your turn, right?
Yeah, just to
So
slow you
that's kind
down.
of their exactly, right? And then if they so deem that the card is so important, they will discard the 2 cards, right? Or if you so deem that the card is too important,
Then you'll
you will attack
attach
for
more
more.
dawn. Understood.
Exactly.
Got it. Got it.
So they want the flexibility in their hand to defend their cards in these first 4 turns of the game as much as possible because that's what's going to lead to them keeping those things alive because that's what they need, right? They care about protecting their early board because that's what's going to generate them residual value and hopefully lead to a victory. Whereas if you're playing a deck that is like Green Kid, you don't need to run that many 2K counters because there are less. What are you defending early? You're throwing out searchers. You can't defend a searcher with a 2K counter. It doesn't. It's not possible. So the only card in the deck that you can realistically defend is Raizo and Okiku. Everything else is a blocker for your leader.
Yeah.
Your leader, you can just afford to take damage in the early game for the most part because you're playing a drop kid. So it's not like you get me. So you wouldn't max out on 2K counters in green. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make as much sense, right?
Understood. That's why I've been seeing lists for green just become a little bit more. Yeah, you wouldn't max out on it, but obviously, since your deck plays searchers, you just play the searchable ones to some extent, right? Probably what I have seen a lot is the 4/4, right? For Oppo, for Ezo.
Yeah.
And then obviously then your events, right? Which your the events are really where I've been seeing the green decks like push more and more. Like they've been at first they were like 2 Punk Gibsons, 1 Waterfall, and nowadays I'm seeing 4 Punk Gibsons and pretty standard nowadays because you want to just
Yeah.
protect that A drop, right? Get to that late game and then just no. So
Exactly. So that's why because green relies more on the late game, right? So the way I play purple, for example, is I'm maxed out on the 4K counters because I mean, yes, I can defend early or I can defend my, but there's no battle cards for me to defend early. There's nothing like it's only my leader. And since I have the option of taking it, I'm not losing anything by taking the damage, right? Like I'm just gaining a card, right? I can
gaining
choose whether or
gaining
not to
draw.
defend. Exactly,
But that I
right? So
think
I have
purple is
those
kind of an
weapons still.
enigma because funnily enough, purple also runs a really high amount of 2K. right? Because you would run. I do see what the standard purple people do is just 12 2K out of 444,
Yeah,
and then they also just max out on the top end, where other decks just cannot afford to. Can't afford to play 444 with events as well on top of that. That's just too much,
yeah. The
too
reason
taxing.
for that is because they need a little bit extra defense because they take a turn off. They take a turn
Oh,
off. No other deck takes a turn, or should not take a turn off. But because you're playing Island, you take a turn off, which means
you
that
have a
you're
pass
immediately,
turn. Got it.
yeah, you have a turn where basically you don't put any significant amount of pressure on the board or on your opponent's board, which means that they're going to probably, if you're gonna play the island, something's gonna live and attack you again, right? Like a rush Zora, right? You can attack it for 6 going second. Um, if you're going second, and if they throw the 2K, it's gonna live if you want to play island, or you can skip the turn playing island, swing at it for more, and then play island the next turn, right? That's a whole nother topic. But basically, you need to be able to defend yourself on those turns more efficiently, because if not, in other words, by taxing them, so they can't just hit you for sixes. If they want to connect, they need to hit you for 7, right? And if they
Of
commit to the
course.
7, you take it, but you force them to commit to the 7.
And then by committing to the 7, once again, you've taxed your opponent into now I get more time, and by me getting more time, now I can stage. My pass a turn doesn't feel. So
Exactly.
that's a really interesting way to look at things. I haven't really thought too in depth about how this whole taxing system works and just how inherent cards create that whole aspect. Basically, summoning a
Yeah.
chopper on 1 into like a Toro on 3 is, in my opinion, very taxing on any separate decks. Um,
Yeah. Whereas
uh,
green just like throws out like mini blockers, right? These things that you can't defend but must be attacked. Perfect.
exactly.
No reason for me to run more 2K counters because they're
Yeah,
only going to
these
come up.
Bonnies, these Momos, they eventually you have to deal with them unless you choose to forego hand advantage, which I don't think you can uh,
You
too
can't.
much in this game. This game, hand advantage seems so unbelievably crazy, right? Like board and hand seem like the two most important factors in the game. I can
Yeah.
run out your hand or I can run out your board. Those are my two potential win
Yeah.
conditions.
There's also tempo. There's also
I mean, of
tempo.
course, tempo. Actually, just speaking of tempo, can you give me a short rundown on what you mean by that term? Because maybe the viewers are not as aware of what tempo means.
Basically, tempo, at least in the One Piece card game, is what I've started to understand about it is that you pay cards in hand for tempo. In other words, the more that you do or open yourself up to, because every card has combo power, right? So playing a card from your hand obviously loses you that combo power in hand to generate that body on board, right? Hopefully it gets more than just what it was worth in your hand. You would hope so, right? Because
Oh,
it's
I
gonna
get it. So
attack, kill something.
basically, that's why
Yeah, it's
Zoro.
gonna.
That's why Zoro's a well-stated card by that opinion. He has no counter in hand, but it also forces counter from your opponent,
Yes, Zoro
right?
should be always, in theory, basically at a base level. A two, technically a 2-for-1, because he always gets to attack, right? Assuming he's attacking,
Of
which
course,
forces interaction. Either your opponent loses something, takes a damage,
the
or
blocker,
loses a card from hand,
of
loses a
course.
blocker, etc. And then he must be attacked on the way back, right? So he takes pressure off the leader. That's why you see Red always have so much life, is because Red just puts thing on the board that you immediately is tapped. You have to attack, you have to address it, so that they don't take life as much. So they have a very high life total. That's kind of
I
like part
mean,
of their
that
defense.
same concept is seen by Doflamingo. Doflamingo is another deck that just continues to summon cards in a rested position. So because of that, they'll end up with super high life totals, and I see it often very consistently. You'll have a Flamingo player at 5 life, the other player is at like 2 life, but then the player that was at 2 life or 1 life is able to flip the game on its head and then finish off those
Exactly.
5 lives very easily, right? Because they eventually run out of that gas.
Exactly. So what happens is the Flamingo is another great example. The red player is then put in a position where he has the tempo, and in order to keep the tempo, he must discard cards from his hand to defend his battle cards that turn sideways, right? So there's certain cards that are like, I would say almost like immune to this, where like for example, a good like I'll just go to like the crazy top end. If you spend your turn killing a 9-drop Shanks,
That
it's a
is,
very it's a valid play. It's the other extreme, right? I attach all my Dawn to kill your 9-drop Shanks.
mhm.
I have not. I have. eliminated, you're basically I have given you the tempo,
Yeah, you're
right?
basically
If you
it's
played it
another pass turn, right? Remove a card from
exactly,
board, and I have passed priority, and like I've not developed this turn. So what are you gonna do with that?
exactly. Whereas where in the early game when someone like plays a Boa Hancock, right, and you swing into it for 7, that opponent currently has is forcing you to make a play that is going to you can gain back the tempo by killing the battle card, right? Because then you're not going to have that pressure swinging at you, right? But it costs you X amount of Dawn, right? It
Yeah,
costs you X amount of
it
your
taxes
turn.
your turn exactly. It takes a
Your turn,
percentage of
right?
your turn, and then if he chooses to defend it, it's gonna take a percentage of his hand, and then that I guess
Exactly.
that's where the risk and reward comes of
True.
the game. Understanding the ebb and flow of the game, like
Yes.
understanding
He
when I should push this. I must
exactly.
defend this card. Sorry.
He will trade his hand for the tempo.
Hmm.
And then the more battle cards you have on board, the more that escalates, right? Because if they spend their turn trying to kill your battle card and not developing their own battle card, now they're in the same position, but now you have two things
Yeah,
or
now you have
three
on the
things on the board.
following turn the same. They're in the same predicament, and now they have not developed to be able to defeat that. Does that make
Yes,
any
and
sense?
then, yeah, and then basically you have like the god of what I call the god of tempo, which is usually in my opinion it's the 10 drop, right? So
Ten drop Kaido, the god of
yeah,
tempo, just comes down
the
and just
god of
says,
tempo. Basically, the best cards in the game are the removal cards, right? The cards that come down, the rush cards or whatever that can come down and eliminate a threat and be a threat of their own, right? They will gain you back all of the advantage on the board, hopefully, and address your opponent's board, right? So those are the flamingos, the Mihawks, the kings, and so on and so forth, right? Those are the jet pistols. So those are like actually jet pistol's not one of them because jet pistol doesn't present a body. So he's actually like Red's removal was made to be weaker for that reason because they didn't want it to be too crazy. Like
Can
if,
you
if Jet
imagine?
Pistol was
And
on a
can you
body,
imagine if I can like summon I don't even a 3K and jet pistol?
yeah, like any type of body with a Jet Pistol would have been insane, right? So that their removal is like more specifically just events, right? It doesn't give you the body; it just like allows you to ignore your opponent's threat, or basically like, oh, you played a thing for that turn instead of like swinging a bunch of Dawn into my thing. Oh, just kill your thing and just keep attacking, right?
There's also the
Um,
idea that cards have power on the back end, right? Like for example, Nico Robin, Okiku, these cards that have the when attacking effect usually have these very powerful effects that come down, but it's
yes,
mostly low. Like you're paying for it up front, right? And if you can get to cash that in, then it's cool. If not, it kind of feels a little bad, right?
yeah, yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Those are the cards that kind of like, yeah, force interaction or will gain more value than the average card. That's what those cards say, right? For all intents and purposes, an Okiku can generate upwards, like it can be as valuable as any card in the game if it is allowed to run rampant. The same thing with Nico Robin, right? Because they're basically removal in a way.
The
They're like
removal with a body,
repetitive.
removal that yeah, they can continuously if it were to
They're
become
repetitive
unrested,
removal.
yeah. It's
Exactly. So there's things like Boa Hancock, things like Jack, like these repetitive sources of value, not just of like you must out counter my attack, right? Because every battle card has that, right? But also being able to apply that pressure. 7 drop kid is one that has very few answers and is why it's a strong card. 8 drop kid is the craziest one, right?
yeah.
Every turn he's creating a mountain of value that he lives, right? So he needs to be addressed as immediately as possible. So like those are the most important cards in the game. Those cards are the cards that warp the game because they force interaction. Nico Robin and Okiku get a jet pistol like crazy. Basil Hawkins gets jet pistol like crazy. Like the cards that just warp the game because when they're on the board, they're going to put such incredible pressure on you so freely on your board or on your hand, on your life, whatever it might be, that they must be addressed, right?
No,
So
I
those are like
completely agree with
the
that. Like
linchpins of the format, basically.
yeah, those cards are terrifying, and like that's why you see, not to get like very matchup specific, but like in the when you're playing against green as green, you want to have cards in your hand that can deal with those cards, aka Cat Viper and Ezo, or Jet Pistols if you're playing against like a Nico Robin base deck, Basil Hawkins, because those cards, if they are allowed to get their value is insane. Just
Exactly.
that body constantly presenting that threat each turn. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, yeah,
But
and it's good to have a mix. I think most decks right now lie in the mid range spectrum, where it's good to have a mix of threats and answers, right? So if you're the one with the tempo, you're the one presenting the next threat. My opponent took their turn to kill my threat, right? If they were able to kill my threat and develop their own, that is kudos to them. That is where you want to be in life,
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly what you want to do.
That's why like six drop king when it comes down on curve when you're playing against purple is like wow that sucked. He killed my thing and he developed a 7K body. He just flipped the game, flipped the script on me, right? Um, but usually what ends up happening at least in the particularly early parts of the game is this one person will take the time to remove the threat and
And not
obviously
develop, and then the other
and
person
not
will present the threat, and then do they have
present
the
the threat
answer, right? And then that's
exactly.
exactly what's going on. That's why I think purple is so cool. But like, purple is different than these other decks because purple is paying for it and getting their value immediately. These on play effects are not recurable. They're just like summon, do something. Whereas these other decks, you kind of have to like really mitigate these next couple of turns. Like if my Okiku is answered, right? Do I have the combo power? Do I need to combo out of it? How much is it taxes their turn?
Yeah, those
And
are
so
going to
on
be
and
the
so forth.
decisions that win events,
Yeah,
honestly in this.
it's really minute stuff, and it happens so quickly, right? Because like in your brain, you're just like Bonnie on one, Okiku on two, Ball on three, right? Like just give an example of a 1-3-5 curve, right? But
Yeah, but that
all of that
doesn't
is
actually
it
happen.
doesn't actually happen, and it's very cognizant, and you have to make the decisions based upon what your hand is, like what you think you can defend from your something that like I think isn't really talked about as much, and people just kind of slam down cards because they're like, I have three, I will pay. You want to optimize your Dawn usage, I guess, is something that I hear a lot of.
Yeah, because you have to assume that your opponent is doing things, and if your opponent is doing things, then you want to answer those things. And if you want to answer those things in a way that is like very efficient, then you're using your dawn. Like your curve isn't just like I play things on curve, right? Because playing things on curve basically seeds the board, right? Or that's maybe not seeds the board. You might develop something like an 8-drop pit that is so game warping that just by playing it, you can ignore the board, right, for a turn or forever, right? But basically, you did not utilize that turn to do anything because you just probably just swung with leader. Maybe you had the board already, which is like a fantastic place to be. But usually, whatever was on board lived, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. Like if you go on curve five, Basil Hawkins, what else are you doing that turn besides attacking with your lead? Like whatever sort of characters you have,
yeah,
right?
that's
What
why yeah, that's why a lot of people, and this is a great point because that's a card. Let's compare Basil Hawkins and Law in the red matchup. The red matchup, you are unable to basically do anything on that turn that it comes down, and at least one of them presents two bodies. So if you're like, okay, I want to take my 5 Dawn to play something on my turn 3, let's say, which is usually not the best time to even play those things, but
well,
if it
let's
gets
just
jet
say,
pistoled, if it gets jet pistol, you probably just lost that game because you didn't kill anything. They took your whole turn from you, and they might have even established another body on top of the one that you didn't kill last turn because you just swung at it for 5. And now you're just like so monumentally behind sometimes. So it's like
but then
it's
again, you
tough.
have these warping cards like a drop kid that you're like maybe you have some comeback potential with some assortment of cards, and that's kind of like where One Piece is, right? Even though you might have these very tempo heavy turns, that small technical, that small micro play that you have as a player, understanding what your position is exactly in the board state and what you need to do, can kind of let you finagle into like potentially getting back the board and sometimes even. I think it's
Yeah.
cool.
And
But
then in the late game, like 4K counters start becoming like really important, right? Because
man, those cards are crazy.
you might have the board, but now your life is in jeopardy, right? And like they can always just go straight for your life. So now those 4K counters put them in the, if you have it, I lose type thing. Because if they go all in, then you just clap them back.
No, I see it all the time. They'll commit their whole turn because the 4K counters. If 2K is taxing, imagine a 4K, right? Like these
It's
cards,
the most taxing.
and the most taxing cards, is probably Love Beam. I want to say maybe Punk Gibson's up there too. I think it's between one of those two guys, right? Because that
No,
Love
no,
Beam.
it's just numerical. Think of it as numerical. The most in that game, because your opponent only has 10 Dawn, right?
Right.
Assuming if they have too much of a board, you know you're dead, right? Like if
Yeah,
you
I mean,
have against purple, you just know you're dead,
yeah.
right? They
Sometimes
have
hands
two
up, you're like, you got
7Ks.
it, bro.
Yeah, yeah, you got it, right? But let's assume like your opponent just has leader, right? And they just have like it's red. You're playing against red. You're holding up it happened earlier today. I was playing red against red. I had two radical beams, and my opponent went all in for a game with a 5 drop Luffy that lived. I put down a blocker, and he went all in. He went 16, and I radical beam, 2K, 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 whatever, and I won the game. Right, but
Okay.
like I'm at
Okay.
zero life, right?
Just
Because it's
casually nice hand, by the way.
yeah, but that's how you should be playing the game. That's how you should be building your decks. You should not be so like be like I will never get behind in a game and never be put in a position where I will not need 4K counters to live. Like because if you build your deck that way, then you literally limit that option, right? So I think every deck should be running 4K counters. How
Just
many?
some
It
assortment.
depends, right? I think minimum two, and I think I would leverage that the medium should be four. I think four is the sweet spot, right? Some decks can run a little bit less. If you run a lot of blockers, you can run a little bit less. For sure, Law doesn't need as many. For example, Green Kid doesn't need as many. It just has a lot of inherent defense, right?
Mhm.
But a lot of these decks should be running. I mean, in purple, I play eight, and I feel great about playing eight.
8 feels
So,
great, man. That's a classic.
and you could play a lot in red too. Probably not correct to play eight in red for sure, but it's like you have to include these cards in your deck to give yourself outs in those situations because if you don't,
Then you won't
then
be able.
when
You're
you're
removing that option from the table. What you're
right,
getting at.
you're forced to play, or you're forced to play a game where you just have to like defend your life at the cost of multiple cards in hand at very awkward situations. And then your board dies more easily because you
Yeah,
don't
your
have
board is more
anything to rely.
susceptible.
Exactly. So you have to play the game, I think, at least for right now in this set, in a way where you're allowed to like play the facets of the game. And the strongest facets of the game is having a lot of these 4K counters later in the game when you have the ability to leave up Dawn to hold them up, and having the correct amount of 2K counters in the early game to force your
Facilitate a
opponent.
board state.
Yeah, because I play no 2K counters. Sure, your opponent attacks something for five
Yeah.
because they're greedy, and they play a full Basil Hawkins on that turn. Yeah, you just lost the game because sure you can jet pistol it, but you have nothing to attack me with.
Yeah,
Like
and then
that's
now
gonna
you
happen.
have nothing, and you pass the tempo right back to your opponent, right? You have
Exactly.
to have
So
some sort of way to defend yourself while also have some sort of strategy to win the game. I get what you're trying to get at, but these are like some really big topics that you're just like fighting through. You're like, yeah, you just kind of have to do.
yeah, it's big topics, but I've been playing the game like a decent bit, and these are like kind of the conclusions I'm getting to. Like I'm starting to realize what the game really boils down to. And it's these very tempo heavy cards. It's these cards that really it's just like the fact that you're limited to the 10 Dawn is like crazy, right? It's like the most my opponent can attack me with is 15, like for the Hail Mary or something. Like
Well,
I can
well,
out-combo
well, well,
15.
well. It can be much higher, obviously, if they have board, but you're arguing with a zero board, the most they can ever hit me is 50.
Right, but obviously there's a trade-off, right? Because you're sacrificing, right, certain things in order to do other things, right? If I tap out for a 9 drop Shanks in a red versus red matchup, I'm
Mm-hmm.
probably clearing the board. Like, there's nothing that's stopping me from killing something with that guy, right? So the board is clear, but now you spend your turn attacking me, right? Like, and then you put me in a vulnerable position, but then I have that board. I get to clear your
You're
board
like,
again.
yeah. I have found myself in those positions. It's very scary, especially with red specifically. I like that you brought that up because sometimes it's very difficult. You want to defend your board, right? But sometimes defending your board and losing the card in hand makes you vulnerable to life. And in doing so, they can sneak you with an easy win with like Diablo Jumble, 5 drop Luffy, and it's just it becomes a little sneaky from the red players sometimes. And it's almost like not sneaky because you know it's coming, but you're like, how do I go about defending from this? I don't find it very easily. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't find it
yeah.
easy to.
Yeah, and like I said, you have to give yourself the options. It's not always going to happen that you're going to have the 4K counters in hand, but at least to give yourself the option to have
Give
them
yourself the
in.
opportunity.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah, and it
fence, yeah.
depends on how more late game your deck is trying to be, right? If your deck is like, fuck it, like if the game went by past turn 5 or 6, I lose. Then yeah, sure, don't include those cards because yeah, whatever. You have no board to defend. Everything died already. Like defending yourself is like minimal at that point, right? So it's just like you need to like also construct your deck to also facilitate that, right? That's why
Like,
like Lobo Beam is great in Flamingo because it's like, yeah, I'll play a 4 drop, I'll discard my hand to defend it, and now I have Lobo Beam.
yeah, now I've now drawn. Get more and more into the game, and then drawing cards. I guess the way that you've boiled this down to is that what comes down to tempo is card advantage, and card advantage can be done by either drawing in hand or on board, and depending on what your deck is trying to do, want to somehow facilitate either gaining that board or gaining that hand. So,
Yeah, Dawn advantage too, because a Radical Beam, for example, is one of the greatest cards in the late game. Probably that one and Blast Breath are the best ones
well,
right
that's
now.
why Blast Breath is so unbelievably crazy because Blast Breath is a radical beam that can be played at any point in the game. Not only
Yeah,
that, but like the Dawn -1 is almost negligible in that specific. You're like Dawn -1, all right, cool. Like doesn't make a difference. I'm still going to 10, baby. Let's go.
yeah. The idea that you can trade one Dawn for 4 is nuts.
Yeah, and that's why I would beg to believe that Blast Breath is like really up there. I'm probably like close to Radical Beam. Maybe Radical Beam is better, but it's very situational. I think Blast Breath might just be best 4K.
Yeah, it is. 1 for 4 is it's that one and the blue one, the
The
Love
Love
Beam.
Love
Those
Beam.
are
I
the
mean, Love Love Beam is crazy because it's 4 and a draw, 2 for 4, whereas the other
yeah.
ones.
Obviously, you can even make it cost 1, and so that it
Well, I
becomes
mean,
really
then it becomes really crazy, right? But that's only on specific.
yeah,
But
yeah. So those cards are very, very good. I think people are underrating them. They should put more of them into their decks, and they'll see how many times they win in the late game situations just because they have those cards. It's really, really good.
I will admit I did not believe in the Love Love Beam, and then because I was like trying to do more Desert Spada, I thought that like 2Ks were more valuable when I first started off, and then the more I just play, the more I do see that these 4Ks are just like, yeah, this card is gonna win me. The 2K is just kind of like they're good. Don't get me wrong. I don't need much as I do need, but I definitely will. But with that being said, thank you, Andrew, for joining us. This I think I will just open up the floor to any questions before we like finish the little podcast. But I hope that anyone that's here appreciate you for giving us that time, giving us the opportunity to talk about the Treasure Cup, and as well as Andrew for being able to sit down and give us some of his expertise, some of his goo, as you will.
The goo.
The goo, man. So what are without leaking too heavily, what were you thinking of playing? Uh Thank you so much, Disturbed Lance, for the follow. Appreciate it, my dude. What do you think is the deck that you'd be willing to play when it comes to these treasure cups? Maybe you have like a couple that you're thinking of, but like what is it
I
that you're
will
kind of
consider anything that we had in that like the top 4. So Red Green Law, Green Kid,
Zoro
Kaido,
and Kaido?
Zoro. Those are the ones I've been testing. Those are I could see any of those essentially be me playing them. I'll probably lean towards Kaido, I mean not Kaido, Kid, just because I think it has the lowest floor. Um, yeah, the highest floor. I'm sorry. Like it has the best bad draws possible. There's very few draws in that deck that feel like really, really, really bad. Whereas I think the other decks can have some actually like awkward draws. I think Law can really see too much of its top end, or just like not have the right interaction pieces for like very, very hard cards for you to deal with, like Nico and Okiku and stuff like that.
Yeah, like some assortment of cards just ends up. I mean, there's always a line that's gonna beat what you can do. There's always something you can do. Specifically, I find that in Law, like you have this strategy, and Kaido is just like 7 drop king into like 10 drop, and it's like very. But I get where you're coming from. Definitely, any of these top 4 decks that is like considered as optimal are probably under the idea of like try playing these. They have like the tempo that you were talking about. They have the opportunity to create that themselves while also having the defense.
Yeah, I think those are just the most complete archetype characters, basically. They give you just the best. What they do is strongest against what's available right now. Right?
Gotcha.
Like that's the best way of putting it, right? What they can do at this current moment is stronger than what the
Than
other players.
what the other characters can do. Then we have a question from Devs at 502. Devs asks, besides the 5 drop Luffy and possibly the Shanks, are there any other heavy cards that you can play in Zoro? And I have been seeing people play different things. Not very, not much, but I think Ben Beckham as well as the vanilla, like big statted cards that people have. tried these cards in your particular deck, or have you tried
Yeah,
to lean more on the any
I
side on the deck?
personally play two Shanks and two Ben Beckham. I think Ben Beckham is very good. I think he's very good in red. I think you should probably be playing two of it in your red deck.
Ben Beckham,
Um,
just for anyone that doesn't know, let me pull him up on the dev. Ben Beckham is, I believe he comes, he's one of the promos right now. Is this from the film deck?
yeah.
Yeah, so he comes from the film deck that you get from joining the shop. He is a 7/9, so he's like really high statted, and he's also combo power. The only drawbacks of him, he's obviously not a Straw Hat Crew character, so he's film similar to the Trafalgar Law, but those are still very very strong cards that you should probably consider playing your deck because you want to have some of that top end, right? That you spend, and that's why I like the Luffy a little bit because you can play that 6-drop Luffy, which is a really good card. But there is a very specific reason that people have like floated towards Ben Beckham, and that's because he's a 7 cost. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, so he hits several marks. He's bad against blue, number one. You don't play this card against blue, but that's fine. It has combo power. You play Shanks, and that's good enough.
Yeah, you just
Uh,
pitch it in the blue matchup.
so you don't care in that matchup, right? It's just a 1K counter. You don't
Yeah,
play.
but then you also have like the five.
In
There's other
red,
very strong cards in the blue matchup, but like that's why
yeah,
some
exactly.
people
You should,
mentioned that the 7 cards gets farmed in blue. You're absolutely right.
yeah,
Flamingo and Mihawk, yeah,
but
do
that's
not pay
that's
7 in that matchup.
you would assume like I don't think your blue matchup is great as red. It's not whether or not you play this or something else is not going to improve it like wildly. I think you're just going to see less blue than the other three. So that's number one. That's benefit of this guy. It's like okay, I'm not going to see as much blue because it is currently probably going to be the least represented color. Against red, it is just out of -2K just pistol range. Very important. Against green, it's just impossible to kill. I mean, it's not, but it's 9. Good luck.
It's not good. It's
Uh,
not good to try and kill him.
and against purple, obviously, most of their removal is set to 6 or less. So it forces them into a 10 drop if they want to get rid of them. So that is why that one is the best. The 6 drop I thought was better because it's on evens and your deck is not the best on evens and you don't want to add more cards on odd. I would love if it wasn't just so susceptible to like this one will get Otama Jet Pistol. This one will get 6 drop Brachial Bomber or 9 drop Kaido. This one is also more
It
killable for green.
equally still loses to the Flamingo and the Mihawk. It just has it. This one just has more. People have more outs to specifically the Yasop, and even though the other one's just a
His
bit heavier.
Yeah, his advantage is he's on evens, right?
Yeah,
So evens is where the deck struggles because you have like a 1-3-5 that is pretty good, and then like whatever 7-9 doesn't really matter. You're playing a red deck, so like you would want like a 6, right? So your 2-4-6 is good, right? So like it would be in theory nice in that sense, just from a curve perspective. But if you're devoting this much time or this much thought into a big thing in red, it better be worth it. It better be very difficult to deal with. And this one is just not as difficult to deal with, sadly. So if you play this and you get 9 drop Kaido, you lose. So
yeah. I mean, playing 6 again. This is that whole concept of tempo, right? So like, if you invest your whole turn into a past turn play this card, and then that card gets immediately answered, that feels terrible. So there is like that merit of understanding when you can field these cards and when you cannot field these cards. I think Disturbed Lands, he mentioned here you can't really play the 7 into the blue matchup, but versus other matchups, you can probably freely summon this card and not feel too bad. And I think that's where Duvall kind of get at. But other than that, I think that's like the top end for these cards. Thought the 8 cost vanilla. Thoughts on the? There's an 8 cost
no,
vanilla.
that one's actually a little too heavy. You'd have to not play Shanks. So you have to make the decision of like, I want to have something on my turn, whatever turn you get to 8th on going second
Well, what
versus
if I
playing
told
Shanks in your
you?
deck.
What if I told you, Andrew, that the A drop is actually Shanks? It is just a Shanks. But
I know it's Shanks, but I'm saying you can either play 9 drop Shanks or this card. And I
no,
think
I
9
know,
drop
I know,
Shanks is
I
better.
know. I thought it was funny that you're. I forgot what the A drop was, and you're like, you can't play Shanks in your deck, and I'm like, it's Shanks.
Shanks is usually just a 9 mana kill anything on the board or kill your opponent, which is pretty good.
I did. In the beginning, I think we all thought that like these really heavy cards in red were just like memey, But the more that we like again understand the game mechanic, the thoughts on tempo in this specific game, we're just like, damn, these cards are not bad. Really did like Shanks. Every time I've summoned him, he's been quite nice to say the least.
Yeah, I don't think you go overboard on your top end, but like two's Ben, two Shanks is felt
No,
pretty
a
good for
two
me.
Ben two. Well, you would also would you consider 5-drop Luffy as top end because that is another heavy non counter card that exists in the deck
It's not really top end. I mean, you could just play it as like
as
I
a
see.
5
I don't.
cost. Yeah, it's just a
Yeah,
5 cost that comes in. But that's something that people
I,
like
I I'm gonna blow your mind.
hit me with it.
You can play it, wait for it,
Hit me
and
with it.
not attack.
Get the
Blew
hell
your
out of here.
mind.
The card says a rush, bro.
Be
Yeah.
surprised against green. I swear, if people understood that they should just play their 5-drop Luffy against green and not attack with it, they would win infinitely more games against green. Infinitely more games against green.
But what if
That
I
is
told
so
you?
much more of a problem
What if I told you I
than
do not
than
draw the
attacking.
5-drop versus green? Do I win then?
Well, I mean, you do have a searcher for it, but if you
No,
don't draw it, then draw.
I'm just memeing. But yeah,
And
sometimes it's important
something
to
as
understand
simple
that.
as that changes that matchup drastically. You immediately remove, if you played him any amount of pressure in the early game, or just like continue the pressure, you almost always at that point in the game, if you do that, eliminate the 8-drop as a realistic option for them. Um, like it's just not possible anymore. Like if that guy's already on board, the 8-drop is just
How do I field the 8-drop into the 5-drop Luffy, bro? I cannot feasibly go 8 nothing. They're just gonna attach everything and kill my 8, and then like I basically answered that big threat. So it's
like you
another
can't
pass
tap
a
him
turn.
immediately.
Yeah,
Like if you can still field the 8 if you're like ahead enough where you can't die on the turn that you play the 8, and they whatever
yeah.
you
Board
just be
states
like
are
hey,
different. Yeah,
yeah, and then you could just be like take my turn off, take a bunch of damage, and be fine. And then sure, I have 4K counters to defend him and stuff. But if you're in any type of position where you're like at that 2 life range and you think that the 8-drop is going to save you, and they have just been sitting on a 5-drop Luffy the entire game that has not turned sideways and they have not given you a chance to kill it, and they have eliminated your Okikus or you just don't have any left, that guy is going to check them. And they don't need the fancy Otama pistol combo. That guy by himself will check your 8-drop because you're not going to have that many cards in hand.
yeah.
So,
And then I
like,
mean, honestly, they could just use the Otama defensively, offensively, however you want, as well as the pistol offensively or defensively from the point. You don't really need them to answer the 8-drop. You have the 5-drop already there. They just have so many more answers that people just don't think about. How do you? Well, with that same question, how do you feel about round table then?
the problem with Roundtable is that like while it is good, it's one, it's not searchable. Two, it doesn't have a trigger. And then like the third thing going against it is that no, actually, there's a third thing that sucks.
Oh my
Third,
god.
you have to still attack the thing, right? So you do actually waste an attack on it. Maybe you have a Nami or something small to attack into it, and then it doesn't matter that much, right? But you still have to have an attacker for it. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have to attack with your leader, and that sucks. So that's an attack that you lost for the turn. And then finally, if they have enough blockers, it still doesn't do anything. So it's like assume this is an answer to 8-drop kid more
Hmm.
than anything.
Yeah, that's what I.
If
That's
they
why.
have
That's
two
why I
blockers and
proposed
you
it.
only have two attackers, what does this do?
It does nothing.
Exactly.
I mean, I
So
do have. Well, I guess you're counting attackers as my leader as well, not just characters.
yeah,
Okay.
your leader and let's say a rusher from hand or something you have on board, like still like dang, like I still can't kill this thing.
Dang, I just paid for it. I did nothing. That's crazy.
So like when you put it all together, it's like okay, but like this doesn't beat blockers. So I need to either out the blockers or have enough attacks to get through the blockers to then kill the thing that was so threatening that I had to play a removal spell that doesn't actually remove the thing.
Well then, okay. So
So
then, based on that idea, right? So on that, you're that's why you think Shanks is so good, right? Shanks is a card that's unblockable, can usually kill a thing on summon, and then it's easily defended, right? So it has all these good things coming for it.
yeah, no, I
Uh
mean Roundtable is great against Shanks, but like sure.
no, no, no.
It's great
Yeah,
against 9-drop and 10-drop Kaido as well.
it's good versus very
So
specific things, but the fact that it's unsearchable also makes it a little bit difficult. But I see where you're getting at in terms of like this is why I think the card is good, and the card is bad. Um,
Yeah, like it has enough downsides to it that
that the
it's
upside is just not.
inflexible. Yeah, you also can't use it as a removal spell for smaller things because it's just bad. You'd rather just attach 4 Dawn to attack something. Like it has to be like a specific number. It's not like pistol where you just kill it, right? So you still have to attack it.
Yeah,
So you
you
have to
still have to
consider,
commit. You still have to
yeah,
commit to
you
the
still
attack.
have to consider that it has to be something usually, right, that you couldn't kill by attaching 4 Dawn already. 'Cause if not, you're
Understood.
just wasting
And
your
that's where
card.
you're talking about like the 10 drop or the 9 drop Kaido. Well, the Shanks you probably with 4 Dawn wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, you just can't clear those cards with any amount of crazy investment. So you can trade this card in your hand for basically. Also, most of those cards you can just kill a lot of the time just by attaching all your Dawn to them and just attacking if you wanted to. But like you're like, okay, well for 4 mana I get to do it with this card.
And I guess the last little question, because based on the way that you're thinking about things, the way that you're presenting these ideas, I want to talk about Diablo Jumbo, and or I may have butchered that, but the way that this card plays out, based off the same thing with Round Table, then how do you feel about the Diablo?
So there's two things that are interesting about this card. Part number one, your opponent can play around it by not taking life so aggressively. In other words, by defending their life more aggressively. And then it might be in a situation where, like, if they did that, you were banking on them not to do that or not to be able to get out of critical attacks that put them at that 1 or 0 life range. Then this card doesn't kill them, and at which point this card doesn't do anything. Part number two about this card, if your opponent does the opposite and doesn't defend so aggressively, but is playing a deck that's playing 4K counters, this is also a bait because then you probably might not still be able to kill them, even though they have, even 5 cards in hand, just because, a 2 4K
Yeah, they'll go
counters is
like
super
Blast Breath, and then continue like
like a
2K.
2K, whatever. Like, which is
Yeah,
not an unreasonable thing if you're playing 2K count like enough 4K counters because you won't have used them earlier in the game because there was no reason to. So you just have them later on in the game. So those are the two downsides of this card. Now, if this card is a great closer when neither of those things happen, right? When your opponent was just unable to defend the attacks because they didn't have enough, you put them at the low life total, and this is just game, right? It can very much happen that way. Um, the better red players will be able to take advantage of this more. But I still think that at max you could play one of this. I think two's too heavy. It's just never a situation where you want to see two, and that's just like a heavy cost. Like you don't draw many cards in red, so like having a card that you can only afford to see one of, or only really want to see one of, appear twice in your hand, I think is too steep of a cost. It's searchable. I play one, in I would play one in red, or not play it at all, depending on what gameplay you're executing. I think this is your top end if you're not playing like
if
a
you're not
single
playing like
card.
Shanks and
Exactly. If you're not
you
playing like
know,
Beckham, Shanks, and all those things, like Six Shot Luffy, like the higher end of red, then this is your top end.
got
Consider
it,
it your
got it.
top end.
That's
And
just an
then decide
interesting
how many you want to see. Decide.
because I do see a lot of players they really just do like these specific cards, and I really just don't understand. Like, I just like to play the top end more, right? Because I like the body more than I like the if that makes any sense. And we
The
also have
body is
another,
way more flexible.
yeah, the
Way
body's just
more
more
flexible.
flexible. I can use it offensively, defensively, matter. Um, and we have another question also. How would you play Red Green Law into Blue Coffee? I think Blue is very tough deck for Red Green Law. How would you think that you would go about doing that matchup just by conceptual?
If you have the 8 drop kid, you should be fine. If you don't have the 8 drop kid, then it depends on how well they drew and how well they play, really. But it's a very difficult matchup. They very cleanly answer all of your 5 drops in a very tempo efficient manner while presenting bodies. You usually cannot race them. So you have to establish complete control over the board, and that requires attacking into big things, which basically means like some situations like Otamo pistol as your outs. Like if they Mihawk you, like they're at 5 life, you're just like Jesus, this is gonna be a mountain. But if you have
Yeah.
the 8 drop, you auto win. So
Yeah, the A drop is something that you can. Yeah, if you can A drop and then obviously some Namis, some Bonnies behind it, you auto beat them. But that also then like it's a deck building conundrum, right? If you're now deciding my deck is going to be slower, I'm going to play the A drop, protect the A drop mentality. The purple matchup now harder as you don't have the early game pressure to really push through them, and then they're just going to start putting bomb after bomb against you.
Yep, that's
It's
paid off.
delicate. It's a very delicate balance in that specific deck between those matchups. Blue and purple keeping you in check, and the fact that we have no side deck, and that really is what and how we deck build
Yeah.
actually.
Also, I think the correct strategy against playing as Dofi, usually if they're on the play, they're going first, right? They'll do Perona on 1, thing on 3, swing at you for 7, you obviously take damage. Um, on your turn, you should probably just attach at minimum 2 Dawn to attack whatever 5k they played. Doesn't matter if it is, doesn't matter if it's Dakuma, doesn't matter, just like whatever, just swing into it.
Just remove it from the board because this is your opportunity to remove it. Once it becomes unrested, now it's something that they can choose when to use it for action, and it's harder at that point.
Exactly. So, or it's just going to attack, and then there's going to be another one, and then they have mana to play a blocker on top of that, or hold up a love beam. It starts getting way more complex.
And it just starts getting bad. It gets bad fast.
It starts snowballing. So force them to discard the 2 cards from hand. If you don't really have anything else relevant to play, you can just attach Ford onto it. That's not necessarily a bad play. That's basically saying you pistoled them. You basically pistoled that card because there's no way they're going to out combo 9. That's crazy talk. They could, but
it's crazy. It's crazy talk, bro.
Yeah, crazy so talk. Like, you can take a turn off. It's fine. Let them hit you again, and then hopefully, I mean, I think the ideal play is still attack for 7 and try to develop your board. Hopefully they don't get out of it. If it's a Boa Hancock, they have a 2k or 1k lava beam in hand, like for the next turn, or a blocker, you're probably just like dead to rights.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the thing about Boa Hancock. She's so crazy because on the follow-up, she's going to attach a Dawn, draw a card, and now you can keep up Dawn for the Love beam. You've also now developed another card off of the Dofi. Now 3 there, 4 there, and you have 2 up, and it's just like... it's gonna get rough fast.
You're gonna be in a big problem because Dofi doesn't care about his hand as much. That's why he's able to like freely defend these, especially Boa. Like Boa, he will sacrifice 4 cards.
Boa is the card you defend because that card is advantage and interaction.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you stack your draws knowing, like, with the mentality of protecting the Boa. Because a lot of times you'll do that, right? Because you'll be like, okay, I'm playing Dofi. The first card I play is Boa. My intention with these 2k counters in my hand is to defend this Boa. So then I won't stack this card. I'll stack this card in this order because I'm going to, draw off a Boa or whatever. Like, if you're getting that deep.
Yeah, no, and that's I mean that's the nitty gritty. That's the skill expression. That's what you've now spent X amount of hours practicing this deck, and you know how to succeed in that line. That's why it's so cool, and that's why blue is it's really interesting. It's just unfortunate that the A drop is such a gatekeeper.
Yeah, that's just like a really big crucifier. Because like if you're protecting your board, you have no hand, and it's like your board of 5Ks does nothing against any drop.
That's the issue. Yeah, because you have to now attach all your Dawn, and now you're basically in that situation. No hand, no Dawn, and then now they can crack you on the crackback, and now your board is gone, and you've spent your hand to do nothing.
Yeah, like if you have to attach more than 2 Dawn just to pressure something, it's just like it's not even pressuring it at that point. Like it's just like your opponent would have to have no cards in hand, basically. Like that is just way too taxing. So it's a tough matchup just for that reason. But if they're not playing that, which most of them aren't, it's not that bad, honestly. Not that bad for Blue Dofi. So they just you kind of have to hope they don't hit the nuts at that point. Because if they hit the nuts, it's going to be bad for Red Green.
And that's why Dofi has I've been surprised to see how many tops because again Green does a good job at gatekeeping. Like if the Dofi snowballs, it just snowballs, and it does feel very good because like they do have now these turns, and now they develop a Virgo here, maybe a Flamingo here, and now it's like whoa, if you play the 8 drop, now they have 7s to go into it, and it just feels kind of nice. So it's very cool to see that people have still had success. It's a very skill intensive deck. A lot of respect to those. God bless. And then I guess with that, I'll just I'll leave the floor open to Dovale if you want to say any opening, or I mean, sorry, not opening, closing statements or anything like that. Any shout outs, anything you want to say before we wrap this up.
Yeah. Once again, I'll shout out PPG for being the homies and giving us the opportunity to represent them and play for them and being the local store that makes us gather and become better together. Yeah.
Damn, that was.
But I also want to shout out our new YouTube channel, Los Fiends. Be sure to check it out. We'll be uploading content on the regular, giving you guys our hot takes on what we think is good. hopefully we have a good performance at the Treasure Cup here in Miami, so that we can have all the clout in the world
Yeah, that would be
to
really
back up
cool. Yeah.
our statements.
No, definitely. I mean, I
um,
don't think you need that to gain clout, Duval. I think you've established yourself pretty well as a good card gamer. Don't worry.
yeah, yeah. But that's always within the community. So like every community is the same. A new card game is different. People have their ideas and their opinions, and we all got. That's the fun part. That's gonna be the exciting part about Treasure Cup is that we're gonna literally come together and put all of our ideas to the test. Right? We think this is good. We think that is good. We think this is the best thing. We think that's the best thing, and so on and so forth. Like everybody's gonna come. It's gonna be like this hodgepodge of like all these, like, even just within set one, it's like pretty cool, and we're gonna like battle it out and figure it out.
No, I do think that's cool. It's like whose idea will reign supreme is what you're trying to say. But definitely, like Duval said, shout out to PPG. Those guys are sick, fantastic tournament organizers, and they're the local game store that we get to gather and play games, as well as, and I haven't done this in my YouTube videos, but I guess while I'm here, their website, the Pro Play Games website, they do specifically choose to make their cards a little bit cheaper than TCG Player. I've just noticed that recently. So if you guys are looking to pick up some fancy cards or finish up your decks, definitely go check them out. And then as well as check out Los Fiends, man. This guy as well as Jonathan, these guys are fantastic card game players and have a wealth of knowledge. They've definitely made me better and helped me understand One Piece. So I'm sure that they can do the same for you. So as thank you again, Duval, and thank the viewers for coming in, checking us out, sitting here for the podcast. And if you're listening on YouTube, make sure to leave a like. Probably if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave a comment. And if anything, if you want to join the Pirate Crew, go ahead and check out that subscribe. Always, guys, thank you so much. We're out.